There was once a quiet room where nothing seemed to move, yet everything was moving. On the wall, an old clock continued its steady rhythm. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound was not loud, it did not demand attention. It simply existed, patient and certain, as it had always been. In that room sat someone who felt the weight of unsaid words pressing against the chest. The air felt heavy, though no storm could be seen. A conversation had just ended, but it had not truly ended. It lingered in the heart. Their words still echoed softly, sharp, and unfinished. They had spoken with confidence. They had spoken as if they understood everything. And when the silence came, they waited. They expected an answer. Perhaps they expected anger. Perhaps they expected defense. Silence to them was a space that had to be filled. But the one sitting in the quiet room did not speak. The clock continued. Tick, tock. Inside, however, there was no silence. Thoughts moved quickly. The mind replayed each sentence. A different response formed, then another, then another. Words rose like waves, each one wanting to break free. How easy it would have been to answer. How natural it would have felt to explain, to correct, to prove something. Isn't that what we do? When someone misunderstands us, do we not rush to clear the fog? When someone doubts us, do we not feel the need to defend our name? The heart beat faster. The body felt warm. The quiet room seemed smaller than before. And yet, the clock did not hurry. Tick, tock. And in that simple rhythm, something important was being learned, without anyone teaching it, without anyone saying it aloud. Time moves, words fade, reactions pass. But the way we choose to meet a moment that stays within us. Tick, tock. The night grew deeper, and the silence no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like strength. They had spoken with certainty. Their voices carried the quiet confidence of those who believe they are right. Each word was placed carefully, almost deliberately, as if building a wall. And when they finished, they did not leave. They waited. There is a certain way people wait when they expect a reaction. Their eyes grow still. Their posture becomes firm. The silence that follows their words feels less like peace and more like pressure. They believed something would come in return, an explanation, a defense, a protest, perhaps even anger. But nothing came, only quiet. Inside, however, it was not quiet at all. The words they had spoken began to echo, not in the room but in the heart. Misunderstood, judged, reduced to something smaller than the truth. That feeling is not loud at first. It begins as a small tightening in the chest, a warmth in the face, a quickening of breath. Why did they see it that way? Why did they not ask? Why did they assume? These questions move softly, but they move quickly. They circle the mind. They search for fairness. To be misunderstood is a lonely thing. It feels like standing in clear light while someone insists you are hidden in shadow. It feels like speaking honestly, yet being heard incorrectly. And in that moment, there is a deep desire to fix it, to speak carefully and correct them, to explain every detail, to protect your name from being shaped by their version of the story. Isn't that natural? Isn't it human to want to be seen clearly? The heart says yes. The ego says even louder. But silence remained. They shifted slightly. Perhaps they felt the quiet stretching longer than they expected. Perhaps they thought the silence meant surrender, or guilt, or weakness. Sometimes people mistake stillness for emptiness. They believe that if you do not defend yourself, you must not value yourself. If you do not raise your voice, you must not have a voice. Yet, inside that silence, something else was happening. There was pain, yes, a gentle ache, a feeling of being unseen. But beneath that ache was something deeper, a question quiet but steady. Must every misunderstanding be corrected? Must every judgment be answered? The clock in the room continued its rhythm, untouched by the tension between people. Time did not pause to witness the discomfort. It simply moved forward, And with each passing second, the heat of emotion began to change, not disappear, just soften. Being misunderstood tests something delicate inside us. It touches our sense of worth. It asks whether we need approval to feel steady. It whispers, "If they think this about you, what does it mean?" But perhaps it means very little. Perhaps what they believe is shaped by their own fears, their own limits, their own stories. When someone expects a reaction, they are often certain of the outcome. They imagine anger. They imagine defense. They imagine noise. Silence confuses them. Silence gives them nothing to hold on to. And yet, for the one who remains quiet, silence is not always easy. It requires holding back the quick reply. It requires letting the wave rise and fall without riding it. There is strength in that restraint, though it does not look like strength from the outside. Inside the quiet room, the air felt different now. The pressure had lessened. The need to prove something had begun to fade. They may still misunderstand. They may still walk away believing their own version. And perhaps that is something we must sometimes allow, not because we are weak, but because not every heart is ready to hear. The silence remained, and within it, a quiet dignity began to grow. As the moments passed, the quiet room seemed to stretch wider. The clock continued its steady rhythm. Tick, tock, tick, tock. And something within began to shift. What had been tension slowly softened, like the last light of evening slipping through a window and warming the edges of a room. They had expected a reaction, a spark, a movement, and yet nothing came. Not because the heart had grown cold, not because the feelings had vanished, but because something else was taking shape. A deeper understanding, one that did not require words. Have you ever noticed how stillness can teach without speaking? How holding back, when every instinct urges you forward, can reveal truths that rushing never shows. In the silence, clarity begins to settle. Not the clarity of the mind alone, but the quiet clarity of knowing who you are, even when the world misunderstands. The emotions that had once risen like a tide now lingered as gentle ripples. Frustration softened into patience. The sharp edge of wanting to explain dulled into quiet observation. And with each breath, the realization me, clearer. Not every moment deserves a reply. Not every action requires a counter. What does it mean to hold your words like a treasure? To let them rest where they are, unspent, not lost, not wasted? Sometimes the most profound statements are the ones left unspoken. Sometimes the power of a moment is found not in what is said, but in what is withheld. The heart begins to notice the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is quick. It burns and fades. Response is measured. It carries a weight that words alone cannot give. And here, in this quiet room, a response was forming, though it would never be spoken aloud. It was forming within the chest, within the spine, within the calm that had replaced the heat of impulse. They may not see it. They may not understand it. They may leave believing they have won, that silence is weakness, that stillness is surrender, and yet the truth is different. True strength does not demand acknowledgement. True power does not need to announce itself. It simply exists, quietly, calmly, unwavering. The one sitting alone noticed something subtle, a sense of self-respect that was not loud or visible, but deep and steady. It came not from proving a point, not from being understood, but from choosing the place of quiet over the place of conflict, choosing restraint over release, choosing to guard the heart instead of giving it to those who would not value it. In the past, perhaps every slight, every misunderstanding, every expectation had drawn a response. But now a different pattern was emerging, a pattern of inner listening, of feeling the rising heat of emotion and letting it settle, of recognizing the truth of one's own heart without needing the world to see it. The room remained still. The clock continued its slow, gentle rhythm. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time did not hurry. Time did not pause. And in that steadiness there was a reflection of something far greater than words could convey. What is it to be truly patient with the self? to allow the storms of emotion to pass, to let the misunderstandings of others exist without dragging you into their weight. Perhaps this is the discipline of holding still, the quiet authority of knowing that not every moment demands your surrender. And as the understanding deepened, the ache of being misunderstood began to fade. Not entirely, perhaps, for the heart remembers, but the ache was no longer sharp. It was tempered with wisdom. It was softened by the gentle awareness that silence can be more powerful than speech. That restraint can be a shield, not a cage. That observing rather than reacting can be a form of care. Care for the self, care for the peace that lives quietly inside. The quiet room had become a sanctuary. The clock continued, and in that rhythm, in that unbroken beat of passing time, something vital was being learned. The strength of a heart is not measured by how loudly it defends itself, but by how patiently it holds itself, how gently it guards its dignity, and how quietly it grows. And so, the one sitting alone breathed deeply. A subtle smile may have formed, though no one would see it. A calm had settled, not of the world, but of the soul. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of something unseen, yet unmistakably real: inner power, quiet authority, and self-respect. The room had grown quiet in a way that felt complete. The clock continued its steady rhythm, tick-tock, tick-tock. And with each sound, the stillness seemed deeper, richer, like the space between stars in a night sky. No one had spoken for some time, and yet nothing felt lacking. The ones who had expected an answer had left, or perhaps they had gone elsewhere in thought. Their absence did not create emptiness, only a gentle openness. The heart, which had been tense and eager for explanation, now rested in a calm it had not known before. Isn't it strange how peace can arrive without ceremony? How it can settle quietly like dust falling in a sunbeam, unnoticed until you pause and see it? It does not announce itself with noise or fanfare. It simply exists, waiting for the soul to notice it. In that quiet, something remarkable became clear. Time moves forward, always. Words fade, even the ones we long to speak. Moments slip past, impossible to hold. And yet, within the stillness, a kind of freedom rises, a freedom that does not depend on anyone else's understanding, a freedom that grows quietly as we choose not to let the actions or judgments of others disturb the life inside us. It was not a dramatic moment. No sudden revelation had struck like lightning. There were no shouts, no applause, no signs that anything had changed at all, and yet everything had changed. The heart felt lighter, the breath deeper, the eyes clearer. The restless storm of reaction had softened into a gentle current, and the self, once tense and alert, now sat quietly, steady, and whole. Perhaps this is the way of inner power. Not to overwhelm, not to demand, not to be seen or heard, but simply to be. To continue quietly, calmly, without seeking permissio. To know that our dignity does not depend on approval. To understand that restraint is not weakness, and that silence, when chosen, is a gift we give to ourselves. The mind, which had raced through words and responses, now settled. The heart, which had burned with misunderstanding, now felt a soft warmth, like sunlight returning after a long, cold night. And the body, which had carried tension, now relaxed, becoming aware of its own steadiness. There is a gentle pride in this, not the pride of boasting, but the quiet recognition of one's own worth. And what of those who had misjudged or misunderstood? Perhaps they still believe what they wish. Perhaps they leave with their own stories, certain in their own truths. And yet, in allowing them to leave without argument, without correction, without struggle, the one sitting in the quiet room has discovered something that cannot be taken away. Something that grows silently, patiently, like a tree whose roots stretch deep into the earth, unseen but strong. There is a lesson here that whispers softly. Not every disturbance requires a reply. Not every misunderstanding demands correction. Not every expectation needs to be met. And in letting the world hold its assumptions, we keep the freedom of our own hearts. The clock continued, tick-tock, tick-tock, each sound a reminder that time moves, that life flows, that every moment is passing whether we speak or remain still. And in this flow, a truth emerges. The most lasting strength is quiet. The most enduring courage is gentle. The most real freedom is inner. So the room remained. The one who had once been ready to respond, to defend, to explain, now simply sat. The silence was no longer heavy. It was not an absence of sound or life. It was a presence, a soft, steady, unwavering presence of self-respect, of calm, of inner power. And in this presence, the heart understood what the mind had not yet fully known. The words left unspoken, the reactions withheld, the expectations ignored, these were not losses. They were seeds. Seeds of peace, seeds of strength, seeds of a life lived with quiet dignity. The night deepened, and the room held the stillness like a gentle promise. The clock's rhythm, steady and patient, carried the moments forward, and the soul, in its quiet observation, felt a sense of completeness. No one could see it. No one could take it. It was a truth known only to the heart, quietly, gently, and forever. And in that truth, there was nothing to prove, nothing to defend, and nothing to fear. Only the soft, unshakable calm of knowing that the life we shape from silence and restraint is a life that endures, unspoken, unwavering, and entirely our own.